Make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine. Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, Revolution Radio, Studio A. Thank you for joining us. You feeling a little bit strange with your energies today? Well, massive CME coming in. And let me do a quick mic check here. Thank you for the message on that. Sometimes when things reset and you get that update from, what do you call it? There we go. It gets better. Somehow we're back on a break again. That was a 30-second intro, and we're going to go for a few ads here, so stick with us. Seems like we're getting the outro again.
Revolution Radio.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? You enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's Hybrid Thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Interrupt your normally scheduled programming to bring you this important broadcasting announcement.
Now is the time to explore your greatest potential, embracing truth, health, and wellness while discarding the system and exposing its corruption. Experience true freedom every Saturday night between 6 and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Live from Studio B, it's the Jonathan Wright Show.
Find it right here at revolution.radio.
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world. The best program on the radio.
Well, it's not secret
kids,
anymore, Stevie.
dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe. Fairy tales, music and movement, numbers, plants, animals, fun, colors, insects. Take care. Cast your ears out to catch a story from the world of other young things. Reach out, up, under, and over. Sing a song. Talk about feelings. Just remember the magic word. The magic word is no! Step on into the Secret Kindergarten. Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Right here on Revolution Radio.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week.
Yes.
But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting.
Yes, I see.
By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs.
Be quiet.
But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more...
Be quiet.
I order you to be quiet.
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back to Mini Ice Age Conversations. David Dubine, Ransom Godwin here after that second intro, the second ad run. So we shall see where it takes us tonight. Anybody feeling strange with the energies by chance? Just asking. How are you going to feel in a few hours should be more the question. Massive CME come rolling in. The first one just hit Earth and about 6 hours ago, but there are two more directly behind it, and those are going to be the biggest of ones that will come rolling in. They're expecting a very large discharge of energy onto the planet. Not the point that you might need a Faraday cage, but if you feel energies when there are solar storms like this is going to be a highly charged one. So look for the aurora if you could. I'm going to try to take you through some real-time data as we mix through this. Everywhere you're looking across the planet, it seems something is amiss. Now, it seems that the Panama Canal is totally closed enough where freighters are moving and rediverting traffic through the Suez Canal, taking the long route around, which involves increased rates because they're running those ships by the day. So the shipper's not going to eat the cost. You are as the consumer. So they'll change those prices as they move along as a force majeure on totals for shipping. And then obviously the person or company store that has bought that good is going to charge a few extra cents per item. And again, it's just inflation built in. Food disruptions, economic disruptions, and Ransom, I'm going to say something before we start tonight. We must speak excruciatingly in a roundabout way about this new gift that has been given to us from Asia. Apparently, the new gift has now been bequeathed to South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand. The new gift is also present in Taiwan. It's present here in Massachusetts. It's also in Ohio. It's in Washington, D.C. And then if we go over to Europe, they are the lucky ones who have all the gifts, and the gift has just 3 times increased itself in the Netherlands, Holland. And will it ever stop is more the question. Oh, Switzerland, Denmark, Netherlands, Ireland now as well. So we can see the gift. That's the gift that just keeps on giving. So Ransom, like I say, man, we got to tread lightly like around that topic, if at all. But what have you seen now? I look at the takeaway of goods out of our lives, and then we have COP28, which they're now trying to ratify. Meat consumption on the planet, which will be pushed in place by a global governance structure to reduce meat consumption by thinning herds. You won't be able to complain at a grocery store. It just won't be there. They're going to go to the farm gate and get your meat supply. So, looks like a wonderful 2024 inbound for us all, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what my doctor told me. I had to cut back on the meat because of my COPD or COP28 or something like that. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I don't know what gift you're talking about, but interestingly enough, um, you know, it's headline news. So I don't see how they're really going to stop if you're talking about what I'm talking about, which is it's all of those phrases that we were using last year. Remember? So I'm not going to read it out loud. So I'll just beat myself.
Is it the new?
Now,
is it the new one? Do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I kind of predicted, like, say you're a nefarious character in a Bond movie, and we're only talking hypothetically. First, you'd put
I wanted
out,
to be that
something to
villain,
scare
dude.
people.
I tried out in Hollywood for the villain role. I didn't get it. I'm too nice.
Yeah. Well, that's what the villain does is, it's a small version of the big thing that comes out first. And as we predicted, actually, on this show, that there might be, if you were going to trick people, per se, you might just put something out there that gets put down on its face as untrue, and then later on it is true, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, according to mainstream news, this article from the Daily Mail, it says that in Massachusetts, it's being hit with a wave of, I don't know if see, that's so messed up that we have to censor ourselves because you don't know what key phrases will set it off. But they can see it on the screen there for those that are watching, those on the radio. It has something to do with your lungs, and it might be colored white.
And the big white dudes are back around spraying stuff.
Right. Or you could just call it pneumonia, basic pneumonia. I mean, I don't think that's, being covered up, that word yet. But anyway, that's Ohio. And then according to this Metro article, China's got releasing more data about the same condition over there. And then, like you said, Europe racing for worst case scenario, according to the Express. And then in China, they have a warning for Taiwan, urging its citizens to avoid travel, just in case things might spike here in the U.S. They don't want people going around over there either because they're scared of what I'm not calling. It's a China pneumonia warning. So that's what it is. And according to Breitbart, hazmat suits, big white men, just like you said, return to disinfect everything. And then we'll get to see those drones again because it'll be round 2 of incrementalization, where you get used to things. And this time it won't be so shocking, right? So there'll be a large portion of the population that's just going to be like, this is just the same as last time. Hopefully, maybe they won't believe everything they hear. Anyway, the European cities most likely to be hit hardest by this mysterious thing. They're already tripping. They are pushing this so hard. And actually, when I was out today, it's my birthday, so I went and scammed all the dispensaries from their free products, right? And when we were out, I already started seeing the people that were wearing their Halloween costumes early or late, depending on however you look at it. But in some other wonderful, great news, I talk a lot about infertility, but that's, basically only in the Western world, because in other places like Asia, Africa, here's an article that says that a woman 70 years old gives birth to 2 twins in Uganda. I mean, just think about that. She did go under IVF in order to get there. But the whole concept that the world, even over here in Africa, is changing to a scientifically controlled top-down system. And that includes everything from you thinking to having a child or anything else that you think you might have freedom or domain over, like traveling, buying things, eating. You know what I mean? But yeah, at the same time as you have them still pushing these, for some, lighthearted comparison. Well, all that's going on to scare you. They're still got these paper mache aliens that they're, they're pushing that, they did the x-ray on, and you could clearly see some people chop some bones and put it together. But they're still pumping out these articles, which makes me think that some kind of soft disclosure is coming. Like articles to get all of those people that would believe in flat earth and, any idea that they had that might not be so mainstream, to get them on board with it, kind of to embarrass them first and then roll it out from their point of view, so that you get caught on their whole idea, because they're doing this from everything from medical to food, health, all of it. You have to go to the authoritative sources or it's not true. It doesn't matter what you researched. It doesn't matter what you looked up or you think or what you think you got educated about. Whatever the board of truth, the truth ministry people all around the world, whatever they say goes. So if, you believe that this 30% DNA of unknown species in these paper mache aliens, they want you to believe that. So later they can, ridicule people whenever they have any type of real evidence or, something like that. The whole world is kind of having a mental breakdown, in my opinion, and they just can't cope with these big ideas kind of that we talk about, like world government, possible famines coming, World War III. These are ideas that are so big that for the average Joe, it's just, too much to think about. You got to pay rent. You got to pay your electricity. You got to, the taxes. And then you're worried about which guy's going to pop in the White House, which by all accounts, in my opinion, I don't know about you, what we're going to see is DeSantis, Newsom. And I almost think that they've already picked Newsom for the job. And he's a big time capitulator with another foreign government, as we saw recently, kind of rubbing it in our faces even. But in the backdrop, you got just people nuts, and the medications are about to cease coming out because more and more, also as predicted, the pharmaceutical industry is for some reason having supply issues, or they're sending medicines to the wrong places. So if any kind of medical emergency pops up, you're going to see a lot of headlines that say shortages, demand, and they want you to really think that there's barely any of that. So it's like a reverse psychology thing for the people that don't actually need some of the products to go get it. Now, for those that really need it, you're going to have a hard time finding it or getting it. Because there's going to be shortages, and I mean shortages from like diabetic medications all the way to psychotropics that keep some people rightly sane and seemingly produces people that are insane. And like every time I look at the headlines, I see something bizarre that you would have thought came out of Mad TV or the what is it, the Babylon Bee. Here's an article. Look, woman stole $800 worth of Barbie toys, and then she led cops on a high-speed chase, knowing that she could get shot to death, die in a car accident, killing other people, whatever. She thought it was worth it for little dolls, little plastic retail items, and this is how they're going to pull this kind of reorganization. They have scientifically mapped out all the demographics of different personalities out there. So they got the super patriotic people. They'll attack them on the domestic terror front and calling them insurgents. Then you got the people that are on verge of mental illness, and they will allow them to do narcotics and act crazy and do all of these things and get away with it. And then you'll have all the people that really have their heartstrings involved in the political machine, and they're going to give them some new characters. And like I said, this is something that I remember I talked about, and this was a prediction years ago from me, that these two guys would be the media's bread and butter right here. DeSantis and Newsom, counter opposites, supposedly, on everything. So you got the pro-American, pro-police state, sort of guy on one side that's supposed to be about law and order and protecting your rights. And then you got the other guy that's pro-liberal, pro-socialist programs, pro-communism, but also pro-police state. But only when it comes to certain things like defending yourselves or questioning the government or not believing in authority. The different demographics of people that are into things. And if you notice that they have a pattern of destroying childhood icons, and their demographic right now to attack is like Generation X.
Yeah, the info war, man. The info war has been lost by the West. You look at this whole thing that's happening in the Middle East, just a statistic now on the info war here in terms of pro different sides of that conflict that's going on. Like back in October, it was around 90% of the comments and 90% of the posts were on the pro-Israeli side of things. Now, fast forward to today, that is pretty much reversed itself. Like when you look at that, it's between, like, say, 19 and 11% of pro-Israeli comments on that. That's a huge swap. That's a huge difference. So whatever's happening, they cannot control the information flow between individuals. So is it from flat Earth to crop circles? Do you believe or not believe? What about the COP28, the climate change? They're going to be working on, like I say, when in the introduction of the program, one thing I'm privy to here with a little bit of info is the ban. They're going several different directions on this, but they all lead to the same point. So first of all, they're trying to say and wrap in all those things you've heard your whole life. Deforestation for cattle ranching is destroying the climate in the Amazon rainforest. Okay, I get it. But who is the largest deforestation corporation on the planet that raises the most cattle in the Amazonian region? McDonald's. Ransom, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I thought I dropped off the net there. My thing flashed.
No, those Mickey D's, man, they really tear it up. You know, I think of all of those things that they preached to us as a kid. I think deforestation is really the only real, thing that you could argue is messed up because of, the dynamics of forests and things like that. And you're right. It's not any individual people or small logging companies. Most of those are actually pretty eco-friendly as far as regrowing habitat when they take it down. But not the megacorps. They never go along with the same programs as they push on the peasant ever, do they?
No. And then the whole thing about, and then they're going to really be pushing on the methane emissions. Now, understand one thing about methane. It's a stark difference. Methane, when released after 12 years, breaks down naturally in the environment. It's chemical reactions through the atmosphere that occur. It takes approximately, I'm not going to say exactly 12 years to the day, but approximately on average 12 years for methane that's released in whatever form it would be, from termites, digesting a log that's fallen in the forest, bogs, cattle methane emissions, whatever it is. And, the human emissions as well in different chemical processes that release methane ourselves. You think natural gas? What happens there? All these things that we do and nature does that release methane, it does go through the atmosphere and it does through a chemical reaction. And on average, 12 years after, those chemical bonds are broken. Now, looking at CO2, that's a different animal. Literally, it stays up for 1,000 years because it doesn't chemically alter and break down. It just does what it does, and then it comes back down through that, what we would consider longer term cycle of being sequestered into the oceans naturally, sequestered back into rocks. One thing that I never understood is why aren't we talking, speaking of reforestation, shellfish farming, where we could reforest the oceans using shellfish and also commercial shell fisheries, because what do you think those shells are comprised of? Calcium carbonate. Yeah, right. The CO2 is a main building block for that. So when you look at processes that could sequester CO2 versus running it down a pipeline and displacing farmers because you got an ethanol plant, and you want to, put that underground for carbon sequestration, underground storage credits to run your own system that needs a global tax on top of that to make it function and enrich only a few who can control the pipelines from those facilities. The simplest of things, why wouldn't we try to push that into, fish farming and shellfish farming should be a major, major, major industry. But again, you're two birds, three birds, one stone with that. You're providing an enormous amount of protein source, which they want to take away, especially with the beef and the animal. It doesn't even matter if it's beef. They're going for also the pigs or the swine industry. And this is the whole thing that they're trying to bring it in addition to just cutting the amount of cattle that will be allowed to be raised due to land degradation and hoof print and hoof scuffing on some of these like grasslands, the stepping on a turtle or something. They're trying to put all these different things in. But when you look at these plenary sessions out at COP28, they all overlap into one giant fingerprint of reducing meat production on the planet. Using that overlapping guise of it's methane, it's deforestation, it's grassland degradation, it's the amount of water that it takes to raise these animals, it's the cruelty, like PETA's in this thing too. It's so cruel to harvest those animals, to turn them into your hamburgers. Yet McDonald's, on the other hand, that's their whole main business model. So you get in these twisted, messages. So McDonald's will be allowed to continue to deforest, raise cattle, and then sell you a $16 Big Mac combo meal. But at the same time, a dude who's running 5 cattle out in his back, 20 acres or something as a family business will be put out of business. So it's the multiple prong approach here is they're trying to limit your access to clean meat from local farms in your local state or your local county, and force you and funnel you through all meats coming through a USDA packing facility. And again, if you know anything about the USDA regulations, you can't have an animal go through that facility unless it follows the vaccination protocol for animals from birth through harvest. You can't even put it in the facility for processing. Like the Amish out here, there's, I've talked to the guy who supplies us with some meat, and he supplies the butchery down at another Amish farm. Even though they grow their own heirloom corn that they feed to their pigs, well, all organic, all heirloom corn for the feed, in addition to anything that's grown or processed on their farm, all comes from the Amish farm itself. They don't buy outside grain because they grow everything they need on site. Those animals are pure. They are clean meat, but they're not allowed to within a mile of a USDA facility because they say that they could cause some sort of swine flu sickness because they didn't get, that full regimen of whatever it is for the rabies shots and these sort of things that go into the animals as they're being raised. So now layer this like a cake. They're going to run with it to try to limit meat production. That is one of the main things that they've already done. A lot of this carbon sequestration and carbon underground storage and this sort of thing. That's kind of old hat for them. So they're just kind of finalizing a few things. But the new kid on the block, the new thing that they are pushing and actually have a plan for this time, and this whole COP28 is nothing more than agreement by global governance to limit meat production. That's mainly, in my opinion, after looking at the research and studying who's there and looking at their sessions and, seeing which agenda goals are being met by this particular critique and this program over here and the funding for that coming from, umpteen different NGOs that are all affiliated with, the same name players that we have heard of, some just passing. It's a full court press on meat production, and this is the only thing that I see coming out of that, because the agreements have been made for how many, years now? We come COP 19 or 18, 17, 16. And we're back to that, 10, 12 of these conferences ago when they agreed on target limits. But what's not been really talked about is actually an action plan agreed upon for all governments to limit meat production on the planet. In play, going live right now as we speak. They've already agreed on so many of these, and I was trying to keep up with it earlier today on what has been passed and ratified as they go. Press the green button. It's live. This whole thing, they're going to be limiting on how many millions of cattle can be raised in a country, how much nitrogen fertilizer can be used to raise fodder crops. And see, that's a big thing. You got to split a hair on this one. It's not about the amount of fertilizer that they do, like they did in the Netherlands and in Holland, that whole area over there. It was nothing about that. The Dutch farmers, they said, oh, they're using too much nitrogen fertilizer and it's going into the ecosystem and something with the waterways, and okay. But that was like a blanket coverage something. This one is very, very, very specific about nitrogen limits on growing food for fodder for then raising animals. Like that is splitting a hair in amongst a hair. You're splitting a hair into like 100 different sections on that. Because to target that nitrogen use just for fodder crop, that's so brand new. It's shocking that I've never seen anything like this before. Generally, it's always been these blanket things that come up. This is the first one that's been a laser niche target on a very specific, types of crops for feed for the green matter. If you're going to let them, free range, great. But if you're going to, like a lot of farmers do, they grow the fodder, they bring it in, they put them in the feed troughs, and then they bring their own, green matter feed in. That's targeting that to stop that production, so farmers won't be able to grow it on their own land to even grow the green, what you consider grasses, sorghum grass, different kind of buckwheat at early stage, any of these kind of field grasses and this sort of stuff that you could grow for animal feed. They're targeting that to stop that at the source because of nitrogen overuse, to stop that whole flow of feed into the whole farming process. That's a first for me to see that. I'm really, they have definitely done their homework on how to knock out every single possible way for small farmers to continue with their livelihoods planet-wide, all agreed by 191 countries. Green button already pressed. That's scary, Ransom, I'm telling you.
We will use the food for a weapon. You sicko. I know, we'll use the food for the weapon. That guy that we're talking about there, the guy in the rubber suit, he may be some 20-year-old guy that just got into a new position in some NGO that's going to push forward all kinds. No, I'm just kidding. But he did look like he was wearing a leather suit or a rubber suit for the last 50 years. He's in almost, I think, every single administration all the way back to Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that they may just celebrate his legacy by pulling off some very interesting things. But, speaking of, I brought this up that we've been predicting pretty good. And here's another one. Let me put it up on the screen for everyone. When I was telling everyone here that AI is writing everything, right? So they're writing speeches for presidents. It's writing everything. And here's this, according to Associated Press, Brazilian city now enacts an ordinance that was secretly written by ChatGPT. Now, this is just a little ordinance in a newly communist country. I mean, socialist. I mean, the same thing, same difference. But anyway, this is there. So they totally wouldn't, decide other things like maybe who you pick to represent you or, any other new laws or policies that might come down from the top that might limit your ability to eat meat and things like that. On my show Saturday, I went across an article that actually says, and now wait for this, this is the kicker when you really think about how things are going, that people that are on a almost all milk, dairy, and meat diet, those of you guys that are lactose tolerant, of course, but the whole, plethora of animal fats that they have been constantly bombarding us with being unhealthy, and it's bad for the environment, it's bad for the earth, it's bad for you, it's bad for the animals. Turns out those people have a better chance of not having how do I say that, mutated cells and tumors associated with those. And the reason for that is because of some kind of compound that only comes out of those animal fats. So when you think about that, it goes along with a lot of other things that you're not supposed to do, or that they will browbeat you about saying that they're bad in one way or another. And one of those just happens to be eating meat, which fits right into their plan of dropping, the CO2 down to extinction levels, which seemingly is their plan. Right now, as it stands, I think we're at I forget what it's like. It's 0.000 something. Anyway, it's like 419 parts per million or something like that. And that's real close to extinction level. And just a minute ago, you were talking about sequestering the CO2 using farms of shellfish and other stuff that uses CO2 to build a shell. Now the problem with that is that if we continue to limit CO2 production and at the same time destroy forests that would sequester that anyway, if we were really worried about that at all, it seems like they're just cutting down the whole ecosystem to burn it down to nothing. So your shellfish farms wouldn't even do good in the future that they're planning, because there wouldn't be enough CO2 in the atmosphere for them to build shells in the right way, which would send them all the way back to the Precambrian, explosion or shortly after that, when organisms couldn't figure out what to build their shells out of. So this would fundamentally change the entire planet if they continue on their course of cutting all CO2 production. And when they mean net zero, they actually mean that. And people haven't figured out that, when you have elites come out and say things, that they actually mean it. So when Bill Gates comes out in a TED Talk and puts a formula up on the screen, and part of that formula is a P that stands for populace, and he says that part of the formula needs to go to zero. That P stands for populace. It also stands for the CO2 that they're trying to get rid of, which is you. Because CO2 is plant food in one way or another. So whether they get rid of you and you go on the ground and get sequestered, that's one way to net zero it, isn't it? Is just to get rid of the organisms that create stuff. But that's only a fraction of what's going on. And they know that their hoax is at an end. More and more people are looking at the larger picture of data. Regular people that can read data and look at graphs for themselves and wonder things like, did the caveman really drive around in big SUVs? And, Neanderthal factories are what caused the ice caps to melt? No, of course not. And that's not what's going on right now. But what you can prove without a doubt is that the government of the world is trying to get rid of A, population, and B, carbon dioxide, which happens to coincide as basically being the same thing. So CO2 is going to be plant food sequestered by trees, or they can sequester it by just eliminating the organisms that produce it and allowing the earth to absorb it and sequester it that way. Here, back to that thing that they were talking about. One of the first guys that was out talking about the last round of pandemic that happened a few years ago is Dr. Peter Hotez. He's an expert. And according to him, Disease X is coming. That's a make-believe disease, and he says it's going to be worse than that of the dreaded vid, meaning that he's predicting, and this is the same guy that wouldn't debate anybody on Joe Rogan or anything about any of the factoids about the previous go-round. The guy now is saying that don't worry about it. Disease X is coming. It's just around the corner, and you need to hide and be scared. And wouldn't it be convenient, just for example, if the entire world, kind of got sickly, and then when people started getting malnutrition sickness, it would kind of blend in with the other things going on, right? So you wouldn't really notice that that's the cause of a lot of people's waning health. It's just simply that their diets don't have the proper nutrition in it. I mean, if you're talking about store-bought food, we know that it's grown in depleted soil, and that even includes the organic selection that you get there. Not to mention that just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not tainted with all of the compounds and chemicals that are involved with industrial production of food. All of it gets tainted, and that's a fact. And then you have this thing that, you also have to look forward to experiencing if they have it their way. And I would suggest anybody out there that this is the time to go to the store and look for things that prevent mucus. In other words, there's a lot of just over-the-counter or not, what do you call that? Yeah, it's over-the-counter, right? If you can just get it, I forget. But anyway, there's a lot of remedies out there that are, some of them are pharmaceuticals, and I don't really trust pharmaceuticals. But a lot of them do exactly what they're supposed to do. So if you get some of those, you might need them, and they might not be available later, including, other stuff, because we are going into winter. Remember that. So, if all these things are happening and at the same time people are being buried, so to speak, alive in snow and other weather, it's the makings for a horrible winter. And I think I say it's a making because it's in the making, and you can see all of the controllers that trigger things or control things, and they're all speaking the same message. They want you to forget that they have set up the world for World War III, so that whenever it starts going on, you forget that they set it up that way, and you'll be more concerned about filling your belly because things get crazy.
Yeah, you got to think how many things will disappear instantly, because if people start to know more about their bodily health, because the last go around, people got pretty versed in medicine. They did a lot of research on their own. There's a lot more people, a lot more versed and a lot more understanding on what these products out of a pharmacy or like a not a 7-Eleven, but a CVS or Rite Aid or something. There's a lot of research done where people can just pop in there and figure out what they could do to stop some sort of, congestion, coughing, these sort of things. But if those are unavailable, then what? Well, then we might have to look back at some Chinese medicine, like goji berries is one. They're more longevity herbs. So if you're looking for things out of Chinese medicine or more ancient Ayurvedic medicines, take a look at what the longevities are. And there's a whole category of just those themselves. And Moringa oleifera is in that, goji berries, Chinese apple, which is a type of small that looks like a date. But these are all what you might consider longevities. And then, take a look at what some of these more ancient cultures used before we had pharmacies and supermarkets. I mean, up until this time, some people call you like a hippie chick or a hippie dude or some kind of, you're just living in the forest kind of hippie man. Well, those are more mainstream media or more mainstream ideas now of taking care of yourself using what's been used for thousands of years. So in addition to what we could get at a store, you might want to kind of front run some of the things like turmeric, cinnamon, these kind of things. Natural is good. Natural is generally synthesized, and then when you get to a Rite Aid or a CVS or something like this, natural is a synthesized, replicated product of that same thing you might get from a goji berry or what you might get from turmeric that is in a pill form that suppresses something, either phlegm, coughing, runny eyes, nose, whatever. There's an enormous amount of these things. And, if you could look into pharmacopoeia books, there's just so much free information online, like the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicinals. There's a huge amount of resources that you could look into. But how long will it be before people also catch on to those little tricks and tips? Now, having that stuff is great, but you're going to have to know how to prepare it. It's not like you just get a big bag of goji berries and just how do you use it? How do you consume that to get the benefit that you're looking for? There's going to be a little preparation, understanding in there, knowledge, know-how, practice, mistakes, whatever. But think beyond the stores, because they will be sold out and there will be limits. Like right now, this is just, I think it's something to do with the drug in it. If you try to go get Sudafed, for example, and you're limited to one box at a time to buy that, because of some in there where if you get enough of it, you can produce another chemical, and I forget which one it is even. So even right now, there's limits on those sort of things, which would be the things you would be targeting, but you wouldn't want to get one box. You want to like load up on 5 boxes of that stuff at a time. So if you can only get one box, you're going to have to go with 2 family members. And I don't know the exact amount of time you have to wait between purchases, but again, you're battling legislation that is put on consumption limits anyway, in terms of like the drug war. But you're also at these times, if this does come back, definitely going to be hit with some limits on what you can buy once again. But the thing they're not limiting so far is the natural pharmacopoeia. And again, India and the Ayurvedic medicines and the plethora of books on that. And also anything going back into the Chinese types of plants that they use for different effects. And longevity is a big one because it contains so many micronutrients that you don't even think of. And that's why they called it longevity herbs. And there's a whole batch of those that the emperors would be privy to. And again, like anything else, the average citizenry wasn't allowed to consume these longevity herbs. It was only for the, royal house, the emperors, that sort of thing. The fiefdoms, the kingdoms, the generals would all get this stuff. Obviously, they needed to stay alive longer. And the more they tell you can't have something, the more people are going to want it. Now, again, it brings us down to the information war again, which is being lost on the Western Front. People are seeing through this whole Ukraine thing as a lost cause now. At what point? And then the information coming out that they could have had a truce way back in 2022, but nope, they were forced to continue. Like, you can only go along telling so many lies now. It's so easy for us to share information. And once it gets shared and there's some validity to it, that's what terrifies these gatekeepers, is their lies and their narratives. People can see through it so clearly, so it never spreads naturally on its own, because, it's like a turd in a punch bowl. You can see it and you're like, I don't want that. It's so clean to see. But true information, it passes on its own, and that's why it gets so much legs and it goes viral, because people see this for the truth that it is, against the narratives that were pushed that seemingly don't add up most of the time. But narratives never trend on their own. Have you noticed that? They're always got to be forced. And if there's any counter information against that narrative, it needs to be suppressed or censored. The true information just flows, man. It's like a garden hose, just gravity fed, man. It goes and goes and goes. So I don't know, Ransom, let me pick you on your brain here. What about a timeline? How long do you think before we're back into controls, lines, and limits again here with this new thing starting into the flu and pneumonia season? You got any timelines?
That's hard to predict, because they just they drop the other shoe out of nowhere, usually with some kind of incident that just like a domino. If you remember last time, it was just one suggestion. And then the next thing you know, you have governors all over the place, and municipalities, businesses, banks, everybody participating in a new program. So, I don't know. It's hard to put a prediction on it, but from every sign that they've done before, any minute now, they will do that again. And, I showed you the headlines, whatever it is, they are pushing it big time already. I mean, like just 2 days ago, I saw some rumors of it as far as, popping up in the U.S., but then now it's it's every news agency now is putting out what's weird about it this time is they literally are using the terms that we were using, talking about rumors, so to speak, last year, right? About things that were still going on in 2022. And now we're coming up to 2024. Maybe they think they've waited long enough in between and that people forgot that the entire world, all of them, and this is what really convinced me that I'm, not so much of a conspiracy theorist as a conspiracy factist, is that when I say there's a world
of conspiracies, you're a conspiracy connoisseur.
Definitely. And one of those, the major one that's been, everybody's had, is that there is a plot for a worldwide governance structure. And that is now evident, especially after the episode in 2020. I mean, we saw every single nation, friend or foe to each other, participate in this to the T, all the way from the distances between, people standing to what they should be doing with their personal, idea of medical prevention. And, it went from there. And I hate that we have to talk that way, but you have no idea what the next keyword in the algorithm will be. I've seen this algorithm that they run, and this is what's so scary, is it's not even humans anymore deciding what we can or cannot say. An algorithm decides that that's bad. It decides that this is a keyword. They use it. The media pushes it. And then there's campaigns against it. And it got to make you wonder when you're talking about this worldwide governance, when it puts down an edict, what triggers that, and how is it that everybody all, consecutively knows, or not consecutive, concurrently knows, right? They all know at the same time. It went around the world, and all the governments, like dominoes, were like, oh, we got to, put stuff and participate in Halloween. You got to wear your hijabs no matter where you go, to the bank, to the, grocery store, to anywhere. And there are still people fighting that to this day. That little argument hasn't even gone away. And I'm worried that in our state, they might really get draconian, because last time our governor put down rules in our state that we couldn't travel and we had to do this and that. Nobody listened. Nobody listened. Now, that same governor is now telling people that they can't be outside and protect themselves, open or concealed. So she has completely lost it. This is a person that says that the Constitution is not definite and we can decide what that means whenever we want to. So that's scary. What will she do this time when she knows no one listened last time? And plus, elections are coming up, yada, yada, yada. It's just a perfect time for all of the conditions to limit one's freedoms, access to information, travel, and last but not least, I think will be food. Because I think once they got everybody trapped into a little system of their incrementalism, and they switch more and more people over to new payment systems and make more and more new rules. Because if you look what's going on in Europe, just a minute ago, you were talking about, they can't stop the information flow because, we share information. It's just too fast. There's several platforms that do it. But in Europe, they're passing laws that allow them to look at private messages, ban or block certain media platforms from even being there. And I remember when I lived there, a while back, years ago in the UK, the restrictions on which websites were really annoying. Like I couldn't go to any American website that I thought that I like to read or look at because there was some kind of firewall and some kind of algorithm or a person that's going out of their way to stop the communication, stop the flow of information any way they can. And that's why they're going all the way to the extent of arresting people for their opinions on social media, to passing laws that allow them to spy on everybody all at once. And then you put into consideration what we talked about a few weeks ago, that there is about to be a new rollout, exponential rollout of technology in the form of mass surveillance. And they're going to use this super fast internet that's now been created, because if China is using it already or has established it earlier than anticipated, that there's other versions of it ready to roll out. Now, once that happened, all bets are off. Governments are right now scrambling to stop this from happening, because once this happens, a split second, a nanosecond, at the speed of light, you can inform the entire world of a lie or cover-up. It's true that any event, people will talk about it for weeks afterwards, and more than half the time, the first story is always the wrong story. However, if you were keeping score in the last 20 years, conspiracy theorists versus the authoritative sources, you would find yourself maybe on the wrong end if you're a person that thought they were, well educated and informed, and you pay attention to the news and new topics. You might have been surprised to find out that they were wrong every time. So it kind of makes you wonder, or boggles your mind, how people can vote for the same programs. Because whether you believe, elections are right or wrong, people are still out there believing that they vote. So there are people that agree with the weirdest things when it comes to freedom.
13 nations agree to abolish farming. COP28. We'll talk about that when we come back. Friend or foe, everybody on the whole planet's demonizing meat right now. Join us right after the break. David Devine, Ransom Godwin, Mini Ice Age Conversations.
During times of both prosperity and disparity, through the rise and fall of great dynasties and civilizations, gold has maintained its purchasing power as a reliable store of value for millennia. Gold has been used as money since 560 BC, when King Croesus of Lydia created a gold coin in his own image. Ever since, it has continued to increase its long-term value and remains the world's most universally accepted form of money. Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422. Or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Want painting depicts one of the most peaceful scenes in American life as a family gathers around a holiday dinner table to give thanks, eat, talk, laugh, and share in an abundance of blessings. While this great American tradition will play out in the coming weeks, a hunger catastrophe is unfolding around the world, putting even the simplest of meals out of reach for a growing number of individuals and families around the world. Right now, nearly 1/3 of the world is food insecure, with over 828 million people going to bed hungry each night. 149 million children experience stunted growth and development due to a chronic lack of essential nutrients. As many as 50 million people in 45 countries are at immediate risk of famine, and more than 45 million children suffer from acute malnutrition or wasting, a devastating condition where a child's body is so starved of nutrients it begins to consume itself. These numbers are staggering, and behind every one of them is a real person. More than 44 million people in the U.S. face hunger, including 1 in 5 children. Millions of people in the U.S. don't have enough food to eat or don't have access to healthy food. This is a big problem, but together we can solve it. Although it isn't always obvious who is going without food or facing food insecurity, it might be your friend, your grandparents, or a coworker who is struggling to put food on the table. It could be a neighbor, the friendly elderly couple down the street. Maybe it's a single dad or mom who might need help. We all have tough times, That's why investing in emergency food storage is a must for you and your family's long-term safety net, but it can also be a life-saving gift. So in this giving season, you could help others by providing a helping hand to those in need of a little extra to make it through. As we always say, those who know what's coming are using today to prepare. American families are preparing. Folks are investing in emergency food storage. And you should be too, and you can start today with ADAPT 2030. Right now you can save $200 on a 3-month emergency food supply for yourself, or even better, for someone in need. Make this holiday season truly a happy one. My Patriot Supply, the country's largest preparedness company, is more than equipped to stock your shelves. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. That's 25 years of security. Just think about that. Almost nothing out there other than gold and guns that will maintain not only value but usefulness and security. And right now, it's $200 off. Get over 2,000 calories every day. Just add water and heat, then eat. Make sure every member of your family has a 3-month food kit from My Patriot Supply.
The messaging that couldn't be controlled. Got to think about AC/DC. They're telling you, you're not going to control whatever, dude. But they were getting popular fast with the wrong message. So do you think that was truly what happened with Bon Scott? I don't know. But anyway, before we went on the break, Ransom said something super important, that friend or foe, every single nation joined the last experiment after 2020 through 2023. They all locked step, lockdowns, telling you what you can wear, not wear, where you can go, where you can't go, how far you need to stand across from everybody. Everybody, all nations in tandem, moved like a school of fish. But I'm telling you, with this COP28, they are doing the exact same thing, moving like a school of fish, every nation, to limit meat production. They're absolutely cutting down on animal husbandry, cows and pigs both. But here's a startling one. 13 nations agree to abolish farming. Now, they don't have the list. They'll release that tomorrow at COP28. It seems like a majority of them are European nations. Now, that sounds good on paper, but what happens when a nation stops farming? They are 100% reliant on another nation. If they decide because of political ideology or thoughts, they could just cut off the food. There'll be a famine in a week. And what if they outlaw gardens? That's not talked about at COP28 this time, but it could be in the future, that you're going to overuse nitrogen or phosphates on your own garden because you might apply the wrong rates. So they could say, well, you have to go to take a course, and which requires a fee, and you have to register your garden, and we have to come and test the soil, make sure that your whatever nitrates are in the permissible ranges. But I'm curious tomorrow when they release the list of the 13 nations that will abolish farming in order to save this beautiful blue planet called Earth. Now, could it be done in centralized food production? Yes, it could. I mean, if you're looking at, really, if we were in a very advanced society where we understood that every soul comes from the Creator and we're all part of the creation, and that type of mentality, instead of going to war, we work together to better our lives, so we didn't have to work for these like wasteful spending for our electric bills and gasoline and, water bills. Like, we pay for water? That's crazy. If we were living in that type of society, a very advanced society that understood the interrelationship between ourselves and the Creator and ourselves and the earth, and ourselves in terms of creativity, centralized food production to feed 13 nations so they didn't have to do that farming themselves, that'd be a great idea. But the world we live in now, that is not a very good idea. That is a control thing, and I am just shocked that would even be considered or allowed to pass. So tomorrow we'll know which nations those were. So anyway, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us speak here about these issues. I know a lot of places we can't. We're walking thin lines because we're streaming up on YouTube. We might have to just stop streaming there and just stay right on Rumble and Vigilante TV and Twitter. Just seems a little bit, we got to walk too many thin lines. So let us know if you think we should kick off of the YouTube streams and just head straight into free speech platforms, especially like this at Revolution Radio. Consider a donation if you like the open format that allows us to discuss anything and everything without, well, we censor ourselves sort of because we're on the YouTube stream still, but other ways and other channels and other hosts and other programs that are talking and trying to fill in a greater picture, I think that's worth something. So Ransom, yeah, man, it seems like friend or foe, we're all back at it. But this time they're targeting meat production, friend or foe. Just like the whole world's going to move, how far you had to stand apart in masks and thing. They're doing it with food production this time with cattle and meat production. The same exact thing, which is startling, but that's the world we live in.
Right. And it's so funny how they're kind of rolling it out. So they leave it for the people to be mad. It's almost like exactly they're trying to set people up for anger, frustration, and torment. Now, the reason I say that is because, we don't know those 13 countries yet. We're going to find out tomorrow. But like you said, most likely they're European nations. Those European nations also happen to be having an unnormal amount of tourist influx coming to see the sites and use the programs and things like that. So it's a powder keg about to go off. And when I say tourists, obviously, I'm being sarcastic. They're undocumented people that are not really wanting to work in Europe. Now, over here in the U.S., we have a whole mix of different stuff going on. But the idea seems to be the same. It's pushing people. It's just different phases of this Agenda 2030 idea where they would shove people, and it's an old idea already, right? So we've been talking about this idea for decades now, and they keep morphing the idea, changing the name or the program, or the NGO starts a new program and calls it something else, because every couple of years people come to the realization that they are not looking out for the common good of the citizenry, and they never have been. These are agendas that the citizenry wouldn't agree with, so they don't tell them. They change the names, and then they just do it anyway. They'll elect a guy in, he does it, they're like, oh, well, we don't like that, and they elect him out, supposedly. Then the next guy that ran against those ideas, he comes in and, oh, well, I'm sorry, I just didn't understand it, and I have to do this for this reason, or not even explain it, and they'll just do the same thing the last guy did. But if you think about it, why would you shove a bunch of people into countries that can't support it and then limit the production of what they can support? Because, I feel like it wouldn't be that big a deal except for the cultural differences and the ideological differences. But it wouldn't be that big of a deal for that amount of people, per se, to come into Europe if they were allowed to up production, increase more farming, and increase more food production, ranching, animal husbandry, and speaking of that, on a little side note, they're passing laws here in the U.S., like where you can't have a certain kind of pig because it grows hair, and therefore it's a wild pig, even though these are generations of pigs that were grown specifically, to have hair and to look that way. And they're totally domesticated animals, but yet they try to reword the laws to outlaw everything. And you got to ask yourself, why would they outlaw drinking water or saving water? Or why would they outlaw farming or any of those things? Because that's all obviously on its face anti-human. But then they brainwash the younger generation to think that all of these, things that feed them, clothe them, and keep the lights on are all bad things. And they never stop to think about the alternative of what this is. Matter of fact, I was looking at a tweet that you did earlier that was some guy from Africa talking about, we need petroleum, we need fossil fuels, we need gasoline, we need production, we need to be in the first world. And you people are crazy over there at the COP thing, because what they're talking about over there is further restricting developing nations of certain demographics and then exploiting other ones that they have their hands more in. So there's all kinds of dirty things going along in the clean energy market. But it seems that the citizenry, at least the purchasers of things in the car market, have said no, and which is forcing the companies to go ahead and back off of it for a while. So there may be a little bit more time. I don't know what the deadline is, but it seems to me that they're racing against nature, and they don't know the exact hour. No one does. Like, it says in the book that's kind of famous. No one will know the time and the hour when it happens, but they know about when it's going to happen. And it seems like they're a race on the clock to get control of everything and get everything situated for the next era of human civilization, which is not going to look like this era. And if you just think about it on its head just for a second, there's a lot of problems with this arrangement on Earth and the way things are, the way things are. If you want to implement these other ideas in which these elite have admittedly said they want to implement, that's a reduction in population. That's a transition of the population over to a dumbed down state of education, where it's not, they're not getting educated. Instead, they just only get instructed. And then you can only look online for answers to things. The authoritative services will be the only ones that tell you the definition of things, the history of things. And I'm sure if you've been paying attention, they are doing a big rewrite on history all over the place, confusing young people on not only demographics of who did what when, but who they were at that time period. And the whole fields of archaeology and sciences are being polluted by Marxist ideas that have no basis in reality or facts or actual science. And a lot of it's fairy tales. And one of those is the idea that human beings came along, and then all of a sudden, in the last, little bit here, we started changing the environment, which, on its face is ridiculous. And I have to give props to the some of the education system, because my son's taking a GED and he was reading a part, and it said right there in there as a fact that the sun controls the weather and the environment and the climate on the planet Earth by changing temperatures and, like the whole thing. It didn't say anything about man-made contributions to carbon dioxide or anything, which I was totally blown away by, right? And I keep getting surprised that there are little nuggets in there for younger people, if they have their head on straight, to question their reality and realize that some of the factoids that you're being pushed are not being pushed at all angles, and some of them are of opposing ideas. And I think that, there's a real chance for Generation Z to kind of do a revolt against the technocratic system, not only because they will understand it better than we will ever will, but also because they are the people that are most likely going to spend a major portion of their lives living and dealing with. And this is the period of time we're calling the reset. We're calling it. It's happening. It's obvious that it's happening. You have everything from governments pushing assisted suicide for various reasons to, cutting production of food that obviously is going to be a chain reaction and a domino in the supply and demand reality that we live in. So if you add millions of people and at the same time cut meat production, what are you going to feed them? Well, they told you eat the bugs. You're not going to own anything. You're going to be happy, which insinuates that these countries that are participating with these people that are talking that way believe in a communist capitalist society. But that society doesn't involve private property, individual rights, or individual, thought. None of that. They want to cut that all the way out. And it kind of looks like a bug system, to be honest. I mean, maybe that's how we turn into grays. There's a lot of people that theorize that gray aliens are like us from the future that came back, and that might be silly. But if you really think about the direction that they're pushing human beings, they're forcing a design of DNA and everything, but also at the same time, they're forcing the ideas and limiting what people can learn. And in order to do that, they're going to have to erase this whole system and burn it down to the ground. And that's exactly, I think, why they call it a reset. It's just like a computer reset. You got to turn it off and then turn it back on.
Yeah, what do you think the event is? Is it the return of the Anunnaki? We had this conversation a little bit once before, because if you came back to a planet with 8 billion people that are much more connected and understand weaponry, etc., versus 400,000 years ago when the first, slave race was created out of the natural, what would be considered Sasquatch mixed with some of their DNA to create the Homo sapien. So the story goes 400,000 years ago, gold mines across South Africa and that area in Zimbabwe, etc. Well, the return of the Anunnaki, is this the event? Is this their gods that they keep referencing? Because all these UFO talk too, is that going to be the craft that arrived before the planet comes? Because you can, if they're that advanced and they've been here and could tinker with DNA 400,000 years ago, the spacecraft that they have could jump years, multiple years, decades in front of the planet that they would reside on. They talk wormwood. There's a name for this planet coming back through. Now, I don't have any, and I can't see any, reference to this or any data showing that there's another, because extragravitational planet within our solar system right now would be wreaking havoc on the orbits of the planets, and I just don't see that. Now, the only way something could come sneaking in is just like in October of 2024, when all the gas giants are on the other side of the solar system, and something comes creeping through on the opposite side. At that point, the gravitation would be some disturbance in that, but it wouldn't be noticeable until it was too late, and then it would be noticeable. Because if the planets were dispersed throughout the solar system in our orbits as they are, and another gravitational body come in, obviously orbits are going to be tweaked. They call it perturbation is a real name for that, but altering an orbit of a planet requires something else gravitationally to do so. Cat would be out of the bag, not sure. But even when they talk about this, is you go back to Sitchin's work and a whole bunch of other. I know a lot of people don't say Sitchin, he made up some stuff, etc. But there's been a lot of other people who are into cuneiform text and doing interpretations past Sitchin style. Everybody defaults back to Sitchin, but there's probably 24 other researchers that grab the torch and still do all these interpretations with the new, and they're always finding new cuneiform text. Man, they are more common. They're as common as any library and any books that you see anywhere across the planet right now. That's how common those cuneiform texts were. But if there were decades plural out, a body coming in that might finally enter the solar system some 20, 30 years out or whatever, it seems that these characters that are down here right now are preparing our planet for their return. Perhaps the stories go of a degraded atmosphere where they need monatomic gold to even maintain their atmosphere. So you have to wonder how different the atmosphere on the Anunnaki world is compared to our own atmosphere on the planet, and why we are trying to reduce CO2 out of this place. Is it to try to equalize what their natural CO2 concentrations are on a different planet? Because they sure don't want any more CO2 being put into this atmosphere. If anything, take it out and put it underground, even if it costs trillions of dollars, doesn't matter. But it seems like the terraforming is ongoing at the same time of trying to get your mind ready for seeing spacecraft come. Now, of course, it'll be new and it'll be novel. And, if something giant pops out that's 12, 14 feet tall and just massively muscular, and get down on your knees and worship us with like 500,000 year advanced weaponry, that's going to throw a couple, wrenches into the cogs there. And is this who these, like I say, these elite, as we understand, are those the gods, and they're preparing our planet for their return? Because you need a weakened fighting force. So take away our meat, take away our proteins, take away the fats and the oils so our brains don't operate or function correctly. There you look. Why did they siege castles back in the day? They wanted to weaken everybody. They wanted people with no energy when they finally were able to break down the doors of the fort. Siege a castle for 6 months or a year and see how the people inside do. And then with your invading force, you literally run over them because they're just laying on the floor with no energy. Unless they had a secret tunnel. But then they always had guards roaming around the countryside looking for those that were smuggling goods in or out of these secret tunnels. unless they were very, 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 very long tunnels of, dozens of miles outside the range of those guards riding horseback looking for people bringing goods into a tunnel somewhere. What about all those underground cities? We got to wonder if people hid from these same creatures, and that's really the reason. Might have been, solar flares, they dug the underground cities, but perhaps some of the reasons was for these Anunnaki characters. Because I was trying to wind that back here with the methane thing, because as you were talking last minute there, Ransom, the global methane hub, because they won't really announce these players, but they're trying to go for a 60% methane emission reduction. So put that in brain first. The COP28 is looking for a 60% methane reduction. So you got to think that's 60% of all farm animals. Is basically what they're targeting on this. And originally back in May of this year, it's called the Global Methane Hub. And they had talked to these agriculture and environmental ministers from 13 countries, and then these countries agreed to come on, and their first steps to cut 60% of methane emissions to show the rest of the world we can do it. Okay, well, this is their list from May 17th, so I don't know if it will remain the same or if it will change or if there's been any other invitees that have decided to join. But this is like Ransom said at the break. The whole world's moving in unison, friend or foe. And this is the same thing here. Now, the nations signing on the pledge to transform their farm policies, a 60% reduction of methane emissions. United States, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Burkina Faso, which Russia is very much in bed with now for the new gold mining and gold smelting facility they're helping build. We got Chile in that list, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Germany, Panama, Peru, and Spain. Now that's the list that they put out, 6 months ago? So I'm curious if any more have joined on to, they call it the science-based initiative. So we'll see how it works out with the food systems. I just thought I'd bring you that little nugget there. And the same thing that dovetails in, one more thing here, Ransom. Again, if we're talking about the return of the Anunnaki, they're going to show us the spacecraft. They're going to get us used to it. These things are going to pop out. They're going to be gigantic. And people feared these Anunnaki. I mean, they were terrified of these things because they were mean. I mean, not mean, but like spitefully, hateful mean toward any human. Like, like you look back at all these movies and all these things and references we've ever seen, like if a non-royal would get down on the ground and like hide their eyes from sight of this thing and put their head on the ground and not even remotely look up at these, what would be considered rulers, emperors, gods for a better term, kings, queens, they would bow and they would put their heads down on the ground and not even look. And, these Anunnaki would just come up and step on their heads. But these guys, I'm telling you, are like 10, 12, 14 foot tall, full muscle with body armor on them, according to the old stories, And eventually they were able to kill a couple, but then what they do, they nuked an entire city because they killed one of their own. You get through these older stories of when the humans were able to kill even a single Anunnaki, the punishment for that was destroying an entire city. I mean, burned it to ashes with what is considered best description, nuclear weapons. But I think it was more of a plasma-based energy frequency weapon like we see with the directed energy weapons, and just level cities of any time even one single Anunnaki was killed in a region. So what do you got to do? You got to disarm the people. So here's another one for all of you 2A out there for you. This one's off Zero Hedge. It's coming in. This is a significant gun safety legislation law. It's the biggest change in 30 years. So they're not really changing much except for 3 words: livelihood and profit. So what they're doing and what they're going to redefine the definition of a gun dealer is now anybody who sells and makes a profit. They've removed the livelihood and profit. to just livelihood, or excuse me, just profit. So anybody, if you sell a gun for $1 more than you bought it for, you have to register as a federal firearms dealer. You have to get your FFL license, and you have to run a background check on the prospective buyer. That's even if you want to sell it to a friend, a neighbor, or a family member. If you sell it for $1 more than you bought it, now, even if you sold it at equal par value, I think that they're still going to consider that a sale. So this in itself, by removing two words out of what the definition of before a federal dealer was, or a dealer of firearms, is now just anybody who sells one and there's any profit involved in it. But, you know, the federal background check you would have to go through to get your FFL license, and the amount of fees, and you got to pay $4,000 a year just to even have that thing. And then the paperwork that needs to be on file for now 20 years, not 2 years. You have to have like storage for your documents of everybody that you sold to. I mean, this just takes it to a whole different level here. And, you know, generally they will have a amount of time where people can write in, and either you support the plan or you don't. It's a review based on how many comments that come in. So what there's been is a grassroots movement in all the leftists of all the blue states to have them write in and support the plan. So right now it's 230,000 of the comments support the plan, and 280,000 do not support the plan. So they're using the same thing now. So I guess if it's over 50% of people who agree that this should be passed, they instantly pass it without any other review or going to the courts. But obviously a lot of the 2A attorneys are going to fight back on this one. Disarm the populace, take away their protein and oil supply to make sure their bodies are not strong and their brains don't function, and then hit them with an enormous amount of fake alien invasion to get prepped and ready for the depop and the return of the Anunnaki. Is that too far-fetched, Ransom, or am I just kind of grasping at a straw here? Because a lot of things are getting weird with this whole space thing.
Well, you know, if I took it serious for a minute, and let's say I absolutely believe there was a something like an Anunnaki that influenced history all over the world and the development of human beings. Because, you know, we get these stories of not just the Anunnaki, but other giants and other legends of things from China to the Americas about beings that influence the outcome of human events. All of these beings, for some reason, like gold. And then it makes you think of, you know, to go to the point by point there, you were talking about these underground cities. Those are not just, you know, in Europe and different places, but that's the same legends of lots of different people, including the Hopi, Navajo, even the Aztec believe they came out of a cave in the beginning. They came out of a cave. So for some reason, there was a generational gap of people that didn't remember living on the surface, if you were to believe these stories. And then you think about the reason why all of these ancient cultures wanted gold when they had no real purpose to use it or have it other than it being a pretty rock that you could kind of bend into little ornaments and stuff. But aside from that, it has no other purpose than technological purposes, conductivity, refraction of heat, and you know, things like that. It has enormous applications for space and things related to surviving space. I'll put it that way. And then think about all of the old places on the earth, including some of the castles that might be the last places that interact with any being of that description, have giant doors. And these people are also the people in modern times that have collected the most gold. Now, that being said, if you believe that that was a outside force that comes periodically to the planet, as Zechariah Sitchin postulized there, or theorized based on his interpretation of cuneiform text, putting a new modern spin on some of the phrases and different things. And then you came to that conclusion that that might be a reality. If they were doing something in preparation for an arrival on Earth, you would have to think about what would be the security protocols for said incursion into a populated world. As on previous stories in the Anunnaki tales, they talk about leaving and coming back and how the populations had changed over time. So this would be the case again, right? Even if it was only several hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago, the last time someone came to collect their tithe or their taxes, so to speak. But as a military security protocol, what would you want to do? Well, you would want to inundate the populace with silly ideas, destructive ideas, destabilizing ideas, destroy the true form of tribalism, which is the nuclear family and the offspring and connections and alliances that makes in a communal form, which have built nations and peoples over time. You would want to destroy that. B, you would want to, do what every military does, which is sort of starve out or emaciate the population. And if you were going to do that without them knowing about it, you would have to do something like offer food that has no nutritional value, or offer food that has a toxic content, or offer food that's been manipulated to change you in some way or another. Through epigenetics, because you're assuming that this outside force is technologically superior, in which case it would use all of the same things that we know about, including AI, which is another way to control the masses. So you'd want to starve them out, emaciate them, and then finally reduce them in number, like we have done in every single campaign of occupation that we've done as the United States of America. First, you destabilize. Then you starve out, like, for example, all through the 90s, people thought we were at peace and we weren't really at war. But in the Gulf, we were bombing Iraq and different places all through the Clinton administration. It's about 8 years. And the targets that they were picking were date plants or baby food manufacturing plants. They destroyed the water cleaning facilities. So all the municipalities no longer had clean water. So if you were talking about an extraterrestrial force, these are the same things that they would do if they wanted to occupy. Now, when you take it into account, all of these things that would be like a human like force doing that, and then put it on extraterrestrials, you'd have to also remember that if they were still doing these type of programs, that means they're not that far technologically advanced than we are, meaning that they would still be susceptible to death by the masses. And then you would want to definitely disarm people everywhere in the world, where you wouldn't have to worry about, an AR-15 going off on Mr. Goliath boy, because we all know David popped him in the forehead and knocked out Goliath. Somebody in the chat put that. We're talking about a David and Goliath situation, but not only in the terms of size, probably. And if you've ever looked at those Anunnaki, I guess cutouts or murals, the one with the bird head, and then there's another guy and he's got the little bag. If you really take a close look at those, I don't happen to have that picture right here, or I'd show it. Take a look at the legs. And matter of fact, when you Google search looking for that picture, you'll find out most of them don't show the legs. But if you look at the legs, it kind of looks like a being about our size is standing in a suit. It looks more mechanical. And if you look at the fingers on the Anunnaki, they look really weird. And if you know about the writings that they put out, you weren't even supposed to depict the Anunnaki in their true form. So they had to stylize what they were showing. And I think there might be some secrets into that, if that indeed is some kind of truthful historical event. But I've always thought about the possibility that that could be a false narrative perpetrated by an early hominid species that was technologically advanced, which would still apply for all of these programs and would fit in a lot of weird missing things in our history. And there's one thing you cannot argue, that one of the most overwhelming conspiracies that we have in the world is the dumbing down and the hiding of history. They really have some kind of problem with the masses of the world understanding where humans came from, how we got here and what happened before the Great Deluge, which, and you were talking about Nibiru. Recently, I watched a show on the Oppenheimer Ranch Project where they were postulating the idea that because Sirius does not move in relation to our sun, in other words, we can see the universe move, all of the stars and galaxies and everything else. We know that that's moving, but in relation to our sun, Sirius does not move, which makes me, puts the idea that actually Sirius might be part of a bigger, wider binary system. And that's actually what we find out in the universe more often, is that solar systems are usually binary and trinary stars. So it's very possible that we just can't see the big picture, and that every so often our two suns come in within a greater, closeness to each other. And I think that actually that would be about 52,000 years that you would actually be able to see and notice the difference. I forgot the math, but there's certain intersection points in which the two suns would be close to each other. Now, if indeed Sirius has planets, then that puts a whole nother question about the distance of relatively close technological, beings, I guess, using equipment to get here. And it makes it more reasonable. And then you have things like the Great Pyramid of Giza, and not unlike all of the other megalithic stones around the world, it seems to be way older, made out of megalithic stones, way older. But this one seems to be a specific machine. I don't know if you know who there is a engineer by the name of Christopher Dunn, and he's done a lot of work. And he theorized that the Great Pyramid of Giza is actually a big, giant mechanical device. And whenever he, demonstrates what he's talking about, it totally makes perfect sense. Not only that, there's evidence to support his theory, because they find this the residue of these substances he talks about. And one of those is sulfuric acid, and the other one is if I could talk right, hydrogenated zinc, I guess. I still don't think I said that right. But anyway, when you put those two chemicals together, which would pour together down these shafts and go into the king's chamber, the chemical reaction that happens puts off gas in the form of hydrogen gas. And then underneath the pyramid is a big space where the Nile River used to come up and hit the roof of the bottom of the pyramid. In this little cavern, and it would make a sonic resonance which would excite these hydrogen particles that would bounce off of each other until X-ray started to be being produced. And that beam of X-ray, not just like a laser that you think of now, but it would be a speed of light beam that would come out of the Great Pyramid, and it would point directly at Sirius. And this would only take about 8 light years to get there. So in other words, there is a telephone sitting there with all this incorporated geometry, sacred geometry, mathematics about the space of our Earth, where its position is and relative to the sun, and all of these other factoids that they couldn't possibly really know at those times. And we're talking, I think, pre-Diluvian, of course, along with most of the other megalithic sites. So if you think about that, someone might have got stuck here a long time ago and sent a message back home. And the thing about that is that story is actually in the Anunnaki Tales, and you can find that in some of the tablets there in the Book of Enki, which was produced into a book. But part of that talks about Alelu, which was the king that got taken over by Anu, and he is the guy that actually went out in the story and found Earth and sent a message back to their planet or to wherever they were at, telling them that he indeed found Earth and it indeed had gold. So, if you really believe these stories, they're kind of, weirdly fit into the spaces of history that they seem to be hiding from humans. So not necessarily I believe that story, but I think it's very possible that some kind of similar version of that story occurred. And like I said, it doesn't have to be aliens. It could be another group of intelligent hominids that maybe were the first to start farming and the first to, invent things like wheels that were dragged along by horses. I'm sure if you really studied history, you might see some indications of that. And we actually do. Like you got the Berber and you got the Bosque people and the Ganchis, all of these three people, one of them Stone Age until the Spanish found them, but all of them saying they came from Atlantis, this land that just disappeared, which may have been the last city of these so-called Anunnaki, or just a different group of hominins that was so far advanced compared to the other groups that they were seen as gods or aliens or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the thing about the cosmic ray changes also when these stars would face each other and come into closer proximity and a certain angularity, perhaps there would be some sort of energetic release based on electromagnetism as they came toward that closest point. Because recently they picked up an enormous amount of, galactic cosmic rays, some of the highest densities we've ever seen, and they're sort of perplexed. They have an idea of which star that would have, gone supernova. But it stands to reason that, coming into a higher cosmic ray density area could also be brought on by the positioning and the closeness of these two stars. Now, that would also have something to do with the size of the beings, the atmospheric changes, the electromagnetic changes, changes to the physiology and also the brain of both inhabited planet or have inhabitants on the star system's planets around both. And it's so interesting when we look at today's different energetics coming off of the sun. There's one called the Enlil spiral, and that just shows when a coronal mass ejection comes and it hits the Earth. And Ransom, why don't I send you a quick Enlil spiral here? It's from the newest one from right now, the CME arriving as we speak. Spaceweather.com or Space Weather Live is what you want to go to for that one. You do the drop-down menu there. But Enlil also. I mean, there's so many references of just modern-day things in space that point directly back to this same exact thing here. Well, the reason I wanted to talk about the space weather, not only the KP index, but the Enlil spiral, is there's a cannibal CME that's arriving pretty much as we speak right now. It's going to be ongoing for the next 6 hours. And if you do feel a little bit energetically boosted or a little bit extra tired or whatever it is, Ransom, I'm sending you this here. I'm going to send you the Enlil spiral so you can post it up and we can watch the animation roll through. There you go. It's over in Skype for you. Your emotions change just in our local system based on the density of how many grams in a cubic centimeter of particles coming off of our sun. So if we're affected by this with one star, if the proximity in its orbit on a sister star would also have some ejecta, which would affect our star to eject even more, then we could see how these ebbs and flows of civilization are on patterns as well. Now, would it happen to be just Sirius, or would it happen to be Sagittarius A? Would it happen to be just whatever star is out there that's close to us? I mean, the Mayans had mapped a huge amount of interactions of stars just in our local spiral arm of the galaxy, in addition to what comes from the center of the galaxy in the black hole, above the ecliptic, below the ecliptic. It seems that when we come above or below on that crossing line, there's a huge amount of interaction electromagnetically with all the stars that are residing on that same line. That there seems to be an incredible amount of, for a better term, push, pull, and over electrification on the stars that pass through this thin band. And we're moving 780,000 kilometers per hour through the thing. So when you go blasting through, you're not going to be sitting in this ecliptic for years and years and years. It's going to be weeks to blow through that center point where there's the most disruptive electromagnetism above and below that. And then we transit through different regions of space, again, mapped out by prior civilizations. Sometimes we come into a higher plasma density area where regional temperatures outside the bow shock are like 6,000 degrees Celsius warmer than we sit today. So you'd have to have, there's got to be some effect that would affect our star and the other planets if it's 6,000 degrees warmer outside the furthest out that our magnetosphere from the sun protects our solar system. And then sometimes we go through denser regions of space where there's just more space debris. There's more rocks, a huge amount of space debris. But then sometimes you overlap these cycles where maybe our sun's at a very low electromagnetic state and we come through a heavy space debris area, and that's why we get a huge amount of dust around the sun, the coma, the photosphere, everything just expands out as this dust burns through the sun's corona. And the sun will apparently expand in size. Again, on a cycle mapped previously. So these interactions of electromagnetism on exterior forces as we travel through different regions of space, sometimes we'll go through, like if you look through the 1950s and 60s, our solar system was transiting through what is considered a Goldilocks zone of empty space, where the temperatures weren't too hot, they weren't too cold, the plasma density wasn't too great, it wasn't too little, it wasn't too hot. There wasn't really a lot of space debris. It was a very pleasant part of space to transit through. But as we come into now, we are definitely getting into what's known as higher temperatures. The only reason I know about the plasma temperatures out there is because there's a huge amount of peer-reviewed research talking about us coming into this cloud right now. Actually, about 5 years back is when we started to enter into this cloud of electrified and heated plasma, all around, way outside our bow shock from the sun's magnetic field. You know, whoever had mapped this out in previous civilizations had far more knowledge than at least what we are allowed to know about. I'd like to get into the Vatican Library for a fair minute there too, and then see what they have in terms of recount or actual maps, mathematical equations, codices. And it's so strange how everybody needed to hide this information. I mean, you look at these, whatever it is, the Tolmecs, the Olmecs, the Mayans, go further back, like the representation of using, Egyptian hieroglyphs. I don't care where you go back, the Hittites, it doesn't matter. The Sumerians used cuneiform, but there's always some symbolism and caricatures and pictograms that need to be interpreted from those eras to make the story make sense. Were they hiding that information from their time as well? Like, were there incredibly smart priests and they're like, oh no, the Anunnaki are around, we need to pictogram this and we need to put it in codices and then we need to hide it, and inside this sort of density of copper in a substrate, they can't detect it, and then they made dolmens out of this and hid all their most precious artifacts inside some sorts of substrated rock that, I don't know, they understood that their metallurgy or their LiDAR equipment couldn't penetrate through. And they hid all that information in there too. I mean, history is murky at best going back a few thousand years. Taking it back 400,000, 300,000, 200,000 years is just ridiculous to try to even think about what might have been or not been. But one thing that remains a constant, we still have this information. We still understand that cultures far older than us had mapped out these changes as we move through the different regions of space and in different polarities above and below, but also the solar polar fields when they reverse themselves, how not just our Earth, but all the other planets seem to have reversals in their magnetic fields as well. Planets rotate in different directions. And we are at one of those pivotal points where now magnetically they're measuring that the solar polar fields are in that crossing over phase. Literally, the crossing. So there's a lot of references into this crossing. Yeah, sure, above and below the ecliptic is one thing. But if you look at what happens on the sun every 11 years with its fields as they come in and out of that regular 11-year cycle, we could talk about something larger in scale on polarity and magnetic fields as well at that crossing over point where north turns south and south is north, and you get that 1 second, microsecond where there's no field between the resetting, and again, you talk about the reset until the polarity is reestablished of what is north and south again, and then those fields start to separate and gain strength once again, and then it goes through the whole cycle. But the solar polar field is something to look at, and we are coming into the solar polar field crossing as we speak. You talk about the galactic cross with Randall Carlson and that work, that's a crossing. Mayans picked up a crossing. We're back at another crossing off of our sun. Now, does it have something to do with what Ransom was referencing, our twin sister star? Is this what really brings on the crossings? I'm starting to wonder, because that's referenced so heavily through history. So, Ransom, I'll let you respond to that because I know it was a lot to unpack, but I was just trying to, sandwich some ideas together based on what you'd said there.
Yeah, it's a mystery to us, but we know that there's certain groups on Earth that have this knowledge, and that's what they have up on us, and that's why these programs to dumb people further down every time they get to this singularity to where worldwide knowledge seems to be spreading, they do this reset, and we kind of cliche the Library of Alexandria, but if you really get into those accounts, you find out that they mostly just burned a bunch of useless books. So the good books disappeared and probably ended up in the Vatican. And you would think that there would be one of these things, the classic idea of Indiana Jones, where they got some warehouse somewhere with all these artifacts in it from the prior times that they don't want us to know about. But they want to be the saviors. That's what government always tries to be. And if a technology was going to get out, they're not going to let it just get out without being metered. So we will kind of know when they're really pushing the end of things is when they no longer care about the metering system. And it seems like they're getting that way today because, when you look at the profits, like from some of these international corporations, Walmart and other places, and then you find out that they're closing stores because of crime and theft. And then you look at the number of loss that they're getting from the crime and theft versus the amount of profit that they're getting, you'll realize that it doesn't make sense. So they could eat the loss for decades and decades and still make massive amounts of profit. So it shows you that the metering system is getting close to being reset into a new type of system completely. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, you can kind of see that as far as the way that they try to debank people, boycott certain things, and any idea that's unpopular to the narrative immediately gets shut down. And in the modern era is kind of the first time that we get to see the strings being pulled and get to see in real time which ideas we're not supposed to be thinking about because they immediately get corrected. But whenever they want you to realize an idea, they don't hide that. So that's why it's, back 15 years ago, Bilderberg was hidden. They said it didn't exist, even though some people were following it around and knew it did. Now we fast forward today, we got openly the World Economic Forum, we got the Chinese government, we got the U.S. government, we got the Russian government, you have the WHO and all of these other organizations just telling you that they're going to be doing things to you regardless of what you think about it. That's the thing that we're getting. And they act like, they're the controllers of the information because they are. All of the real information that has anything to do with who we are, why we're here, or how did we get here seems to be obscured by them. And they feed us fairy tales, which makes me think that they are never going to willingly let human beings know the full picture. Because they cannot have a slave class if the slave class is as educated and knowledgeable as them, and they may be trying to stop some kind of singularity. A lot of in past during these megalithic times that we may not have needed writing because we were telepathic at that time. And if something like that were to happen and be possible from some kind of changes from cosmic rays or magnetic fields or any of that, they would most assuredly want to stop that from happening. So whether it's a singularity of, discovering something that will change the fabric of reality for every human being on Earth, or a belief system that they don't like, they will shut it down. And we're seeing that now. Everything's being homogenized into this Borg-like system. And it's funny because even the Borg reference is another one of those ideas that they gave you from a show that was heavily funded by people that push eugenics ideas and socialism ideas. And indeed, most of the actors that take part in those programs have the same leftist views. So it's like they show you the design and then they start implementing it. But we are so used to the incrementalism. I don't think we're going to see it coming as a civilization when it hits us all at once.
And to round us out tonight, David Dubine, Ransom Godwin signing off here. The South Caribbean island nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Planning to roll out its national digital identity system next year. Wow. It's everywhere, isn't it? School of Fish. The planet moves together. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Revolution